The U.S. Department of Energy is cleaning up the Oak Ridge Reservation of residual hazardous and radioactive contamination left over as a result of decades of nuclear energy research. Much of that work has been influenced by the Oak Ridge Site-Specific Advisory Board, a citizens panel that provides independent advice and recommendations on DOE's cleanup operations. You're welcome to attend the meetings and be part of this important work.
Good evening, everyone. It's 6 o'clock. We'll go ahead and get our meeting started. I'd like to welcome everybody. I see that we do have a few empty spaces, but I see a lot of people online. We want to thank y'all for joining us this evening. And I'm gonna start off with Jay. Hello, Jay. Good to have you back, as I said earlier.
Respect.
Do you have any comments for us?
I wasn't expecting it to play out that way, obviously. So we were talking earlier about my time I had spent at headquarters, and I was listening to you, and you had a few y'alls in there, and that was what I got made fun of when I was in DC. Is evidently I used that quite a bit. And this morning we've got the Canadians here. We were talking to them a bit, giving some presentations, and they were talking about the difficulty of one of their sites is in one province, but it's separated from the other province by a river. And that other province happens to be Quebec. And I said, they speak a completely different language. And I thought about the fact that sometimes we do here. This has been pointed out to me a few times, but we have the right accent. It's the rest of them. So my wife's is Sicilian from New Jersey. So when we first got married, there was a lot of, we would have arguments. Thank you for coming tonight. Certainly appreciate you guys giving me an opportunity to speak here and give a few opening remarks, bring you up to speed. And certainly appreciate everybody. I recognize it's a volunteer board, and so we certainly appreciate all of you being willing to participate in this. It certainly is a good board for us to hear. To help us understand some of what the community's concerns are and to give us feedback on our cleanup programs. We appreciate that. So I know it's been a little while since I came and have spoken to you. Also, I did want to bring you up to date on a few things. We did finish our second reactor, D&D, over at Oak Ridge National Laboratory. We're actually into our third reactor over there. The first reactor we did was a kind of an old pool style reactor, which really, if you're not familiar with reactors, actually does look like swimming. Not the reactor you kind of think of that produces power. The second reactor that we did is the light intensity test reactor, which was a test reactor, but it looks more like what you would expect. It's a miniaturized reactor vessel, but we actually did, UCOR did that pool for us. We had several times we had to stop and take a look because we hit conditions not unexpectedly that were not what we expected at a national laboratory where things were changed and weren't always well documented. And so that's pretty typical of what we find when we do D&D work here in some of the old facilities. But UCOR did a very good job in doing that safely, even though we had several stops along the way, step back and reassess. That was a project that was being tracked by the deputy secretary as one of our major projects within the EM. And so we were able to deliver that ahead of the scheduled date and still do it very safely. So I'm pretty proud of the contractor and the DOE crew that was involved with that. As y'all know, I think last year we finished up the biology complex, or the Mouse House, you may have heard it called in the past, over at Y12. From that property back over the NNSA. A couple of weeks ago, they actually had their groundbreaking for the lithium processing facility that they'll put there. So that's really the first realization of what we have been doing at Y12 and Cornell, which is not make land available for the community like we've done at EDP, but to make land available for new programs. So that was pretty exciting for us to see that coming behind. And then finally, tomorrow night, and I would certainly encourage any of you that would like to come, we're having a poster session at the Scarborough Community Center so that we can share some of this and some of the progress that we've been making. So feel free to come to that. It's from 5 to 7 p.m. So many of my staff will be there. I will be there for a little while. I think the Canadians are coming as well. And I think that is everything in my talking points. Plus you got a little extra as well. You always get extra with me. It's like cocaine. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Ms. Jones.
Well, thank you. Melissa? You're gonna save your time, aren't you? Roger?
Nothing bad, thank you.
We'll go to online. Samantha with EPA. Do you have anything for us tonight?
Hi, yes. Thanks for having this meeting and your involvement in the cleanup of the Oak Ridge site. We're grateful for the new MOA, I believe, memorandum of understanding or agreement with DOE, where we've been able to hire 2 new people to help out on the massive amount of workload that we have. I had planned to be there in person tonight, but I got sick and wasn't able to travel. But Brian Begley is one of our new hires. I believe he's in the room. Brian, if you can wave your hand. Brian comes to us from Kentucky. He was a federal facility project manager for the Paducah site, but he has to wait a year before he can start working on Paducah again. So we've got him helping out at Oak Ridge, and he's currently working with Carl on the groundwater remedies that we're in the process of doing. Another new hire we have is John Sayer. I'm not sure if he's there or not. He's mainly working on the EMDF landfill project. So we're grateful to have both of them come on staff so we can help share the workload. And our primary goals for this year are to complete 3 records of decisions. The main plant area interim rod, the K3133 groundwater rod, and the Zone 1 finals rod. So we're really excited about that, plus finishing up the work at ETTP and all the great work that's going on at ORNL and Y12. So thank you for allowing me to be here.
Well, thank you. We appreciate you being here. I also see online we have Christoph tonight. Christoph, do you have anything for us?
Good evening. My apology, I'm not present in person. I'm indisposed as well. I do not have any announcements or comments. But
Well,
thank you for your participation.
Thank you for being here. Ms. Harriet, we will have our presentation given, and Harriet's going to do our bios.
We have 2 presenters. Morgan Carden serves as the federal project manager for the excess contaminated facilities at Y12 for the Department of Energy's Oak Ridge Office of Environmental Management. She oversees the deactivation and demolition of facilities, environmental management, surveillance, and maintenance activities at Y12. She also has experience overseeing the nuclear operations and maintenance activities at the Oak Ridge National Laboratory. Her career includes 7 years of experience working with the Department of Energy and private sector environmental service companies. Welcome.
Thank you. So good evening. I'm going to go over a brief presentation on how we're reducing risk at the Y12 footprint. So this slide shows the current state of Y12, and as you can see, it's extremely congested. There's very little room for any future development. And 60% of NSA's facilities are more than 40 years old, with many dating back to the Manhattan Project. And so this next slide actually shows our future goals and what we want it to look like. You see, there's a lot more green space, there's a lot more room for development to support the national security mission for Y-12. So this slide, basically just want to emphasize that we transitioned our workforce to ORNL Y-12 from ETTP in 2020. The complex has many high-risk facilities that pose various risks and challenges. So our goal is to reduce these risks for our workers and the public, and also pave the way for modernization of the Y-12 national security mission. The figure to the right, it shows legacy facilities that OREM will be addressing. Those are the facilities that are in red. We'll characterize these facilities, prepare them for demolition, and eventually demolish them to reduce the risks. This figure shows just a map of Y-12 and how we've broken the footprint into individual exposure units. And as of right now, we've either completed demolition or preparing facilities for demolition in exposure units 4, 5, and 8, which are, so 4 is right here, 5 is right here, and then 8 is over here. So these next few slides, I'm going to go over the facilities that we've already completed demolition on or we're preparing for demolition. This is the biology complex. Jay mentioned it in his opening remarks that it was originally constructed to perform uranium recovery until about 1947. And then the mission changed and was then used to support the study of the effects of radiation on mice and other animals. And the primary contaminants of concern in this facility were asbestos, PCBs, uranium, organic material. The building to the right is building 9207. It was the largest facility in the biology complex. And this complex originally had about 11 facilities. Some of these facilities include, there's Annex, Tower Annex, Mammalian Genetics Lab, which you all probably know it as the Mouse House. Some utility buildings, and there's a radiation source building where they stored all their radiological sources that they used in the complex. So pre-demolition activities actually began in May of 2016. And these demolition activities consisted of activities such as characterization facility, which, I mean, we characterize everything from floors, walls, ceilings, equipment, that we found, stairwells, anything that we could find that would have any type of sampling data that we would need to know for waste characterization, health characterization, anything like that. We also completed activities such as removal of universal and loose waste, hazardous waste, and asbestos abatement. And all of these pre-demolition activities took almost 5 years. So it took a very long time for us to get through these facilities to prepare them even for demolition. And once we're finally ready for demolition, it took about a year. It started in February of 2021 and it ended in February of 2022. Once the buildings were demolished, we characterized the footprint in accordance with our Upper East Fork Poplar Creek Broad. And based on the sampling data, there was a no further action declared for this footprint. And that basically means that none of the samples exceeded any of the maximum remediation levels, any of the average concentrations of the contaminants of concern in the rod, and the trigger level threshold for mercury was not exceeded. So the bottom right photo, that gravel lot, is what it looks like now when we were complete with our demolition and characterization. I do want to note that the demolition of this, excuse me, of this facility was not originally planned for 2021. In order to support the national security mission at Y-12, we began our pre-demolition and deactivation activities early to allow NNSA to begin the construction on the lithium processing facility that Jay mentioned. They had the groundbreaking ceremony last month. So this next slide is building 9213. This facility is already demolished. This building and its ancillary facilities were constructed in 1949. They were made to perform experiments and collect data from low energy, potentially chain reacting assemblies. These facilities included the Criticality Experimental Laboratory, which was the 9213 building. And there were also ancillary facilities such as an HVAC unit, a guard portal, and a motor generator. These pre-demolition activities began in 2020. And it took about a year or 2 years for us to complete these demolition or pre-demolition activities as well. It's a lot smaller building than biology, but it still took a while for us to get these activities completed because it just takes a lot of work for our crews to go in and characterize and remove any hazards. The demolition of the facilities took place in the summer of 22 and were completed in December of 22. Once the facility was demolished, the radiological surveys that we performed on the soil beneath the slab footprint did show that we had several areas that were greater than twice background. And so the area was posted as a soil contamination area. For the time being, we have placed a 1 foot gravel cover over this area for protection, and we use it as a laydown yard for our crews to stage material. So this next slide is Alpha 2 facility. We're preparing this facility for demolition. This facility was originally constructed to perform uranium enrichment, and this was one of our Manhattan era facilities. We've completed almost all of the pre-demolition and deactivation activities, and they include similar activities that I've mentioned before. We've got asbestos and beryllium abatement. We've collected numerous samples, and we've also performed radiological screening, removal of universal and loose waste and hazardous waste. Our next activities will be entering the basement of the facility to complete pre-demolition activities. And once our pre-demolition activities are complete and we're getting closer to demolition, we will backfill the basement with CLSM. This will allow our crews to come in and perform demolition safely so that they're not going to fall into a hole. And demolition expected to begin summer of 2024.
Do y'all know what CLSM
I'm
is?
sorry.
It's basically a flowable fill that's a very light grout material that we can dig out with packers.
We do plan on having to go back into this basement and pull out some of the CLSM because there are some areas that we're unable to access safely now. So we want to go fill it in with CLSM and perform the demolition. And then when the building is gone, we'll go back and remove part of that CLSM placement. The Beta 1 facility is also one of our Manhattan era facilities. It was also constructed to perform uranium enrichment. And we are currently preparing this facility for demolition as well. The deactivation activities are very similar to what I've mentioned before. But this one is a little different, I want to note, because we did have a basement that was full of water for very many years. And we have been working for many months to pump the water out of this basement. As of this week, I believe we've pumped over 1.6 million gallons of water out of this basement. When this water is pumped out of the basement, it goes through a water treatment system in order to meet regulatory limits, and we sample it regularly, and it is then discharged into the creek. I do want to note one high risk activity that our crews did perform was the fogging of thorium piping. So this fogging activity fixed the thorium contamination to the pipe. So it allowed us to reduce the risk to our workers, and they're able to safely dispose of this piping. And as of right now, demolition is scheduled for fall of 2025. And these are some pictures I added of our crews doing an amazing job of having to work in these facilities and perform all these pre-demolition and deactivation activities. And as you can see on the top left, I think those are the electrical crew trying to figure out a path forward on where they want to work, trying to read the diagrams and with the flashlight with all the PPE on. And then we've got the sampling in the center, and then on the far right, we've got the waste removal. And that is all. Does anyone have any questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Of the totality that needs to be done, what is your estimate of the percentage completed at this point? Because did I hear there were how many zones?
The EUs.
Yeah. 12, yeah, that sounds right. So, at your estimation of the totality that needs to be done, the goal, the finished product that was shown, at what percentage are we approximately now?
I don't know that we could answer that question here. We could probably get you an answer to that. But to put it in perspective, based on current budget projections, you're probably not done in the 2050s. So that gives you an idea how much work we have.
So would it be fair to say far less than 50%? Okay,
Yes, that would be fair.
Yes.
That at least that puts it kind of in perspective,
Right.
because it sounds like you've done a whole lot, but there's a whole lot to be done.
I mean, if you want to, part of also what might put it in perspective, that we had so the Canadians today, we were talking about ETTP, and that we're almost done out there. We've got most of the soils done. There's a little bit left to go. All the buildings that we're going to tear down are done. Working on groundwater decisions that in fact Samantha talked about up there. And so one of their questions was, well, when did you start cleanup out there? And everybody kind of looked at each other because it depends on what you want to call start. Right? But we all kind of settled in on sometime in the mid-90s is when we kind of is when the site transitioned from defense programs over to the predecessor to EM. So technically that's kind of when it started. We were doing surveillance and maintenance. But really the building D&D and prep for D&D, that actually started probably in the early 2000s and took us, till 2020 to get all that done. Working on soil and groundwater ever since. So it kind of shows you the lengths of time. And that's a site that I owned, or that EM owned. And so we were kind of masters of our own domain. What complicates things at Y12 and RNL is they're very congested, and we're working on somebody else's site. So we're kind of tenants out there, and we have to work around their needs as well while they have active operations. So it does create a bit more coordination necessity, that type of thing. And then just getting the workforce on and off the site is not an easy matter when you've got all the work that science and NSA are also doing, right? You've got major construction projects that they've got going on that are modernizing their sites. We have aligned very closely our cleanup schedules with their modernization programs. But it just goes to show that it's a bit more difficult. It's not as easy as it was. So I think to give you an idea, just kind of staggering when I heard this, but at least a month ago, I know there's some things going on with the workforce with UP out, but a month ago, just in NSA, not including the EM folks, was bringing on about 9,500 people every day. And at the lab, science is bringing on about 6,500 a day. And then we contribute another 2,500 to that. So that just gives you an idea. I mean, that's an amazing number. I've heard that compared to, I've been here since 1995, and we've had high points and low points. I don't think we've ever had that many people trying to get in and out of science. And they're doing the road on school. Hopefully none of y'all have to go to work or home.
They don't let us in.
The other thing that you may have picked up on, Morgan was talking about how the length of time it took us to do the pre-demo work versus the demo work. Been on the facility about 70 to 80% of the hazard and 70 to 80% of the money is spent doing the pre-demo.
Yeah.
The demo itself goes usually pretty quickly because it's all heavy equipment. Most of the hazards are gone by then, type of thing. So that's another metric that may be helpful too.
Does anybody else have any questions?
Okay, well, go ahead. Thanks, first. Okay. I'm kind of a groundwater freak. Source of water in Beta. Where's it come?
Groundwater infiltration.
It's groundwater infiltration.
Yep, and there's a sump pump. There were sump pumps in there.
From the beginning. So it's been there from day one. They built the building and let it spell fire. All right, got it.
So my question basically follows that there's might be some kind of exchange of water with the groundwater, or it was water that was contained within the building.
There's groundwater.
So there's the possibility of leakage from that water to the groundwater.
Yes.
The main source of the
Yes,
water.
there is transmission that goes on. I mean, the whole reason we have a mercury problem out there is the mercury that was used in some of the buildings found its way into the soil and into the groundwater, and the surface water. So that's not unusual for any of the buildings we have, that any of the radiological material and or chemical hazards that are in there can find their way in groundwater. That's pretty typical for the sites that we have.
Okay, can we hold the rest of the questions until we have the other presentation?
Switch out.
You get to introduce.
Yeah, Harriet's gonna
I can
introduce.
talk.
Yeah.
Michael Vestal serves as the federal project manager for ORNL cleanup, the Oak Ridge Reservation Environmental Management. He currently manages projects for pre-demolition and demolition at ORNL's excess contaminated facilities and CERCLA investigations at the ORNL assessment units and exposure units. His career includes 30 years of experience working in environmental compliance and project oversight, with 6 years with TDEC and DOE, 21 years with the Department of Army, and 3 years with Oregon. Welcome.
Good evening. Next, let's see. I'm gonna say next slide. I've got control of the slides. Basically, we're trying to get ORNL, we're trying to get the high-risk contaminated facilities eliminated and then clean up the soil beneath those so that we can reduce the risk, the environmental risk, and release that property for future development for the ORNL mission. So there's really three things. You got deactivation, demolition, and then the remedial action part. A lot of times the D&D means deactivation, decommissioning to some people, demolition to others, excess contaminated facilities. We've also used another term called installation facility disposition program. But it's deactivation of the facilities, all that pre-demolition work, then demolition. Takes a lot of coordination between our cleanup contractor, UCOR, ORM, headquarters, regulators, the site contractors like UTB, FY12, CNS, and the Office of Sciences as well. You look at the upper left picture, it's kind of where we are currently. The lower right picture is where we plan to be around the year 2050, I believe. However, it shows the sites that we want to clear. We fully expect that the ORNL mission will fully utilize many of those cleared sites. That's the goal. Approximately 327 buildings are planned to have some type of deactivation demolition type work at ORNL. Like Jay had mentioned earlier, probably 75 to 80% of the work is in the deactivation pre-demolition part of it. You know, the planning documents that have to go in, the regulatory review of those planning documents. You know, once those are all approved and we get approval from the State Historic Preservation Officer, move forward as well. That's part of the response as well. Then we go in and we can do the cold and dark process, take it to temporary power, put temporary power back in the facility. A lot of that cold and dark process requires us to move utilities, to reroute utilities, and that takes a lot of coordination and a lot of time that has to be done. The characterization of the facility for pre-demolition waste as well as the demolition waste. Then we get to remove the universal waste, the hazardous waste. combustible waste. A lot of that removed, like we said, there's a lot of asbestos in these buildings out there. We'll get into some more of the challenges on the next slide. Just to show you real quick, most of the facilities that are currently on contract for deactivation demolition are right in the middle of the central campus there at ORN. So you can see how congested that is. We have a lot of challenges there dealing with an active site, dealing with the security at the site. I mean, some of these buildings are 50 to 100 feet from an active building that Sciences is using. We'll show you some pictures later on kind of to illustrate that. So those are some of the challenges. Other challenges that we're facing at ORNL are the different radionuclides. You got a lot of high gamma, high beta, alpha. You've got all of it at ORNL. We've got toward the north part of the site there, you've got the reactors. Toward the center of the site, you've got all the isotope row facilities, isotope production facilities. And then toward the southern part of the site, you've got the wastewater treatment. And then we've got our facilities in Melton Valley. You got the homogeneous reactor experiment there on the left. And then on the right, you have the experimental gas cooled reactor. And notice its proximity to the white building is the Sciences Fusion Laboratory. So you got interconnection of the utilities that has to be dealt with there, as well as the close proximity of the activities there. So it's not just a problem for the Bethel Valley facilities, an issue, but say a problem. It's a challenge. We call it a challenge. So the challenges, we've gone over some of those challenges already. Some facilities are real close to each other, the multiple radionuclides. It's just a higher technical difficulty and a lot of extra planning because of working on an active site with all the different radionuclides that we're doing. But despite the challenges, we've had a lot of successes. The tritium target facility, the 7025 area, we were able to demolish that. We're now working with the state on doing some remedial action, some soils in that area, state and EPA. We're dealing with the 3026 West Cell Bank was demolished and removed in 2021. Bulk shielding reactor facility. That's the 3010 facility that Jay mentioned earlier, was the first DOE reactor to be demolished. And our low intensity test reactor, we just completed that recently. We've got major deactivation underway at the graphite reactor support facilities, our isotope row facilities, the Oak Ridge research reactor, and a lot of different hot cells. There we go. Our 3026 hot cell facility, you look at the upper left-hand corner, it shows that we had the west cells and the east cell bank. And notice just to the north of that, there is an active building. And I want to stress too, just across the road, Offices of Sciences has just recently built a new facility. So in real close proximity, due to that, those plans, we actually developed and put a flexible membrane structure over those hot cells to make sure that we contained any potential airborne contamination that might get out. The lower left picture shows the inside of the facility after the west cell bank had been removed, and it shows a picture of the east cell banks. The upper right picture shows the actual material from the west cell bank after it was demolished that had to be removed.
Seems like we have some operator error here.
Maybe. I think where do I need to point it? Up there? We'll get down to that.
We're going to have problems.
Yeah, she didn't have an issue with them. The picture we're showing here are the two of the reactors we mentioned, The one in, got the yellow square, the one in the upper part of the square is the low intensity test reactor, 3005, and the lower part of the square is the 3010 test reactor, not bulk shielding reactor complex that we have. Okay. This picture shows the beginning we have for the bulk shielding reactor. Picture to the right shows after it partially demolished, and the picture at the bottom shows the completion of that project after they completely demolished the building and hauled the waste off site, found some pressure run type material. We're able to utilize that site for like a laydown area and an area that they were to when they started the 3005 demolition. And this picture shows the picture of building 3005 low intensity test reactor. The upper picture shows the reactor building before any demolition actually began. It began by taking, this one was different because I think Jay had mentioned earlier is the reactor was the last thing we pulled from this building because of the way it was constructed. The reactor was put in first, and then the building was basically constructed around the reactor, with even some of the shield blocks being used to support the second and third floors. Based on that, it had to come down in a different manner. So they began by taking the east and west laboratories on the sides of the building, and then they began taking the siding off the building, and then began taking the superstructure, the iron parts of it. So they brought that all down, and then we had the reactor left to be pulled. UCOR done a great job basically working through the issues that were faced there and being able to pull that reactor safely and get it packaged and ready to go. Some of our deactivation work we got going on right now at the Oak Ridge Research Reactor. It is a pool type reactor as well. They had to refill the pool with water. There was fixative on the inside of the pool that then clouded the water, so they weren't able to make the cuts that they needed to make at first. So they had to back up and replan once again. So as they started going down, they started making some of the cuts, and then they had a release of water to LGWO because some of the piping inside the pool didn't match up with the drawings. So once again, you had inaccurate drawings. So that created an issue for them, but they actually were able to work through that. We've got the pool down to, I think, the last 12 feet of water remains in the pool. If you look on the lower left corner picture, that is actually the top half of the Oak Ridge Research Reactor being removed from the pool. So it was pulled out. And there's another picture of that on the picture on the right as well. The top picture shows they actually have to place their basket in the pool. So the really hot items, they will be taking out and putting those in the basket. So as they segmented, they laid those hot items on the bottom of the pool. Anything that wasn't hot, they were able to package and get off site. So now they have to put those hot items inside the baskets. And then those baskets will be pulled out and put into a cask to get ready to ship out west.
In the terminology, hot, it's not physically hot. It's radioactive activated, so it's very radioactive.
Picture we're showing here are the Oak Ridge Graphite Reactor Support Facilities. You have the furthest building to the north in that square is the filter house. It is a very contaminated facility that tried to decontaminate. They had to remove some of the filters. A lot of the filters were still in that building that had to be removed, and now they're decontaminating the facility inside so that whenever they get ready to demolish it, it will not spread contamination. And in this facility, just to the lower part of that is the fan house and the stack are all part of that demolition plan activity. I believe that we should get that accomplished hopefully this year. It's the plan in 2024. Are there any questions?
Okay, we'll take questions from inside the room and then we'll go to the members online.
Doing our typical thing.
Yep.
I just wondered, what is the basket that you're referring to that they're putting these things in?
It's like a metal basket that has holes in it. I think they've got different size ones. That particular one, I think looked like it was approximately 6 foot diameter, 6 to 8 feet diameter. It's put in the pool, and then as they put the hot items in it, they'll fill that basket up. Then they'll take a crane and pull that basket up and let the water drain. Once the water drains, they'll use the crane to come over and put it into a cask. The cask is made as a shipping cask that's ready to go for transportation. So once they do that, then they'll put the lid on, it'll be ready to go.
I've got a couple of questions. So from what I understand Morgan to say, and make sure I'm understanding this right, the water that was in the basement into the building over time? Okay, that's the way I understood it, but I wanted to verify. And then on the OR and L side, will any of that ever be private land, or I mean, is it always going to be an active lab?
I would think that the long-term mission of OR now is going to be there for a long.
Okay. That's kind of bigger.
But ultimately, science would have to answer that question. But they have the ProServe building that was a private building. Science has just bought that. So it seems to be headed the other direction now, but that's not to say in the future there might not be some privatization activities at the lab, but that would ultimately be for science to answer since it's their science.
Well, I figured as long as it has been laboratories, it probably always would be.
Any of the landfills and things like that we have at Whitewood or now in the burial grounds will remain under DOE control.
Chris?
On the basement, you mentioned that was groundwater. There was originally pumps that kept that out, or do you guys know when that kind of ceased to pump, when they shut that down?
Depending on the building, most of the Alpha Beta buildings, they all have partially open basements. At the time, it was much more important to get the rest of the building out than it was to have a nice finished basement. Most all of those buildings did have or still do have active sumps. And depending on the building, the sumps have been turned off. Several of them still have active. Others have been turned off over time. Beta 2 was still an active facility up into the late 90s. I'm going to say, well, we can get you the exact date, but I think it was probably around 2000. The sumps were.
Yeah, 2000, early 2000s.
Do they characterize those by like what's in the building, I guess, if they pump should or shouldn't be turned off, or I just wondered what.
May help us understand. We only own or have possession of 3 of the buildings at the time right now. The other ones are all owned either by NNSA or Science, and they operate those. And whether those sumps are on or off is theirs.
So I think ultimately what you're getting at is what does DOE arrive at these decisions about what they do or don't spend money? So kind of the history here has been early on, at least, and we saw this out at C Technology Park as well. That when DOE was done with the building, we just quit spending money on it, right? We didn't re-roof it, we didn't maintain it. And so that made it very, very difficult 25 years later when we went to do work in those buildings to put people in. So there was a lot of lessons learned in the EM program. You need to maintain your building structure. And if you have sumps and things like that, you need to maintain those running. But the history had been that folks didn't. Why would I spend? I mean, look at it from NSA or their predecessor defense programs perspective at Y-12 or science at Oronell. I get paid to do world-class science and experiments. I get paid to produce weapons. I don't get paid to produce weapons that nobody's in, right? And so they did not spend money on that. Now, the department over time has learned that's not the best way to do business. And you saw on a couple of those pictures that showed reddish colored buildings on both sides. Those buildings actually were identified via an IG report and a couple of GAO reports a few years ago that said the department has all these, what they call high risk contaminated facilities within the department that need to be dealt with. Every program owns them. So science, NSA, NE, and EM throughout the complex. And you need to prioritize these and start working on them. And that was in the 2015-16 timeframe. And that took a little while for the department to digest, but there has been a lot of energy spent now on lining those up. And by the way, 25% or about a quarter of those are in Oak Ridge. Of all the ones in the complex. And the ones that are the quote worst of the worst, that's GAO's language, sit at Y-12. Those are the mercury use buildings in these. And so that's what's kind of been the impetus to get us over there much earlier than had initially been planned. So that was part of the plus ups. You started seeing the perforators give EM and Oak Ridge back in 2015-2016 timeframe. That allowed us to go over and take care of some of the equipment, the COLEX equipment that was physically outside mercury use buildings contained mercury. We took out several tons of mercury that were sitting in abandoned equipment in essence right next to the. So what you're going to find is that buildings in many cases weren't shut down in a disciplined manner like you would expect today. To the point when I used to walk through buildings as a facility rep, it truly at ETDP, it truly looked like they'd walked in one day and said, you know what, come on, cut the lights off. We still had cards laid out for people who were in the middle of park games. You still had control rooms. You still had calendars hanging up where people had been marking them off, jackets hanging up. They had intended to come back the next day. So that's how things were kind of shut down for good or bad. And so that's part of what we deal with when we go back into the buildings. There was a euphemistic term like organic material that was used. That was pigeon droppings. So much pigeon dropping could not go into the building without wearing a respirator. So that gives you an idea of what some of the conditions in the buildings are. Sure. And design standards that were used back then are not what you would do today. So one of the reactors that it's the one we're in the middle of doing, 3042. It is actually built over an active spring. You would never build a reactor today over an active spring. It's in the basement. We collect the water, send it over for treatment and discharge. So,
Harold, I see you have your hand up. You have a question?
Yeah, mine is more of a comment. Jay, it's only fitting and proper that Jay Mullis would be back in Oak Ridge to bask in the success of the ETT project. He and I both were running that site many, many years ago, so he knew the difficulty of those operations and the chronology of getting to where we are now. So it's fitting and proper that Jay should be back to bask in the glory of that site. Also, that's a comment. The only question I had, I think, has been answered. The Beta 1 water infiltration. I was just wondering, was it any mercury in that material, and is it housed at the to-be completed mercury treatment facility? But apparently it was only groundwater. I think I heard that.
I don't think there was an marker in that.
Just background.
Okay.
just background. And I just want to give a shout out to UCOR and the federal project directors that have done as much as has been done at Y12 and ORNL. Those facilities, for those that have been like me, that have been around for many decades, to see them come down in close proximity with other facilities and clearing those land parcels up for other facilities is just amazing.
Thank you, Harold. Is there any other questions online? And I guess we will go to our visitors. Do any of our visitors? Oh, I'm sorry, Harriet. Do you have another one?
Well, it was a bit of a digression, but the discussion was of the skills of the people doing cleanup. And does UCOR train their own people? Do they bring in people who are trained? I get the impression they're taking people that were at ETTP that they can and moving them on. But any of the educational institutions in the area doing anything that helps you guys out in terms of training people?
Yes.
Yes.
So UCOR has a number of programs. They work with the craft, the unions to do an apprentice readiness program to bring new folks that are interested in doing some of this work in through the unions. And then they have about 6 weeks of block training is what they call it, that they'll send the folks to. And that's an interesting question. So when we first moved over, got the additional funding that we weren't expected, which accelerated the move over to start working at Y12 and ORNL. It took a little while to figure out that one, we were already behind the curve on how to do that. And it became a big logistics issue about where you're going to put all those people. But as getting onto and doing the work within biology complex meant bringing on new craft that had not typically worked within the EM or DOE complex. And we started seeing a number of safety issues. And so part of the fix for that was to take folks that had been here for a while working in and had had the OJT and were used to what DOE expected and working on DOE site and kind of feathering in the new folks into existing crews as opposed to just having new crews. So you've got that going on. As well, there's partnerships with Roane State Community College and with Mississippi State to get rad techs, chemical operators, things like that. So folks that would have an associate's degree or equivalent. And UCOR has also partnered with UT. And I think, Harold, you maybe have something to do with that program where you have a D&D certificate.
Yes,
As part of the nuclear engineering department.
yes, sir.
And as well, here recently, UCOR is working to also set up a nuclear engineering program at Tennessee Tech.
Okay.
So, and all that's being viewed as a feeder into EM work, but also if they want to, if they want to take a job within the plants, that's fine too.
I was just looking at the date in 2050, it's a career.
Yes, it is. It's
Yeah.
generational, right? It's more than one generation's worth of work.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, now we'll go to our guests. Does anybody have any questions?
We do have one public comment.
We're going questions.
Well,
We didn't have any questions for the public. No one responded.
Okay, well, I'll cover them all here then.
okay, we'll get to the public comment here shortly. Okay, so I guess I saw the questions. Okay, so now we can go to public comments. That would be you, Luther.
Here as always. Yes, my name is Luther Gibson. I was a member of the Oak Ridge Site System Advisory Board from 1999 to 2005. Board chair in 2001 and 2. I retired in 2017 after 40 years of service at Paducah, Y12, ETTP, and Y12 the second time. I have some comments on the process surrounding the study of on the issue of excess facilities reductions at 112 at Orono and Oronell, as well as the same concerns I previously expressed about the operation and engagement of the board. With exceptions, topics amenable to recommendations generally have documents and other readily available material that can be studied to learn more about the issue beyond the simplified presentation during the meeting. Circle process and its public involvement are somewhat of a model, as a proposed plan is backed up by feasibility study and other documentation, data, and administrative records. Lack of justifying information to evaluate the proposed remedy versus alternatives has to be addressed, raised as an issue. Recommendations on budget priority are generally informed by past and current budget justification and execution. A budget priority recommendation would, however, be better informed with more information from the life cycle baseline. But the life cycle baseline itself is shared. We can revisit that when we do the discussion of budget priorities. But now I want to say tonight that a true evaluation of risk reduction in the facilities will start with identification of all facilities and hazardous materials under the purview of Oak Ridge Environmental Management. What information is available as a resource and background for this issue? Well, the Oak Ridge Reservation cleanup contract with UCOR lists everything with a facility number for which the contractor has cleanup, closure, surveillance, and maintenance or monitoring responsibilities. The contract with Astec also has similar information. In addition, these contracts cover legacy waste with difficult disposition. It should be expedited nonetheless to reduce work risks.
Luther,
Yes?
you're at your 2 minutes, sir. I'm sorry. We've all got a copy of it, though.
No, here, I got a couple more paragraphs here. I mean, I've got a couple more sentences here. What's
Since there's only one person, you have 10 minutes.
Okay, that's fine. Go right ahead.
Let me see here. What I was going to say is that the all hazard survey report of the UV order 151.1D comprehensive emergency management system should address everything assigned a facility number with its potential to cause health, safety, and environmental incidents. I think that would have been able to look at it if she first got started this and prioritized the work. The analysis presented in the it also raises the identifies hazardous materials that need to be evaluated further in a document called EPHA. The analysis in the EPHA can be used to evaluate the reduction in potential event consequences if actions taken to reduce the hazardous materials present. As much information as can be shared from these documents would better inform an understanding of this issue. And my concerns about the operation engagement of the board continue to be broadly how frequently you meet and limitations on the topics addressed. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm sorry I went over.
You to take public comment for the records to Monday the 13th. Just email or call for more information on that if needed.
Are there any additions or motions to approve the agenda?
Second.
All in favor of approving the agenda? Say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Is there any request for new action items? Hearing none. Our next meeting will be February 14th at 6 o'clock, and we will be discussing the 2026 budget.
Yeah, I need to make a correction. It's
Okay.
going to be ongoing efforts to assure waste disposal capacity. The budget one is in March.
Okay. So, I'm sorry, February will be what?
It'll be ongoing waste efforts to assure waste disposal capacity. It'll be Dennis Mayton presenting.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, well, that concludes our presentation portion of the meeting. If we'll take a couple-minute recess, that way our visitors, if they would like presentators. Thank you for not happening. Would like to take a moment because I know y'all probably don't want to stay for the whole meeting. But thank you all for coming tonight and thank you for your presentation. It actually was very encouraging in a lot of ways and educational too. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
So our first business today is to elect new officers. So we've currently got a slate of candidates who said they are interested in filling these positions. But as I read out the position and the person who has agreed to fill that position, if there's any other member that would like to be considered, please let us know. Or another member can nominate another individual as long as they have that person's consent. Our candidates are for chair, Amy Jones. She's currently our vice chair and has been a member since 2019. Are there any other members that would like to be considered for chair or any other nominations? We'll move on to the next position then. For vice chair, we have Chris Bartholomew. Sorry, Chris. She's been a member of the board since 2022. Do we have any other members? I'm sorry, Chris. Look at Christine.
Melissa, it's okay. He's good with that.
I'm so sorry. Are there any other members who'd like to be considered for vice chair, or do you have any nominations? So now I'm going to move on to secretary, seeing there's none. Harriet McCurdy is currently a co-chair of the EM Stewardship Committee and has been a member of the board since 2019. Are there any other members that would like to be considered for chair, for secretary, or do we have any other nominations? Seeing that we don't have any other nominations, do I have a motion to vote on this slate of candidates? And we have a second. Right? Do you want to? All in favor of this slate of candidates, please raise your hand and hold them up until I've counted. Members online, if you would raise your hand if you agree. Motion appears unanimous. Thank you. Congratulations to Amy Jones, Chris Bartholomew, and Harriet McCurdy. I'm going to turn the meeting over to Amy Jones.
Thank you. And thank everybody for, okay, so let's see. The first order of business after that is going to be voting to approve the previous meeting minutes. I need a motion to approve those. Second. All in favor of approving the motion or the minutes for the previous meeting, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, minutes will be approved. Okay, response to recommendation and DDFO report. Melissa?
We currently don't have any open recommendations. I did want to take a chance, a moment to mention that we have the work plan for this year in your package. It has not been approved yet because we've not had a vice chair. So we will be working with Amy to get that approved shortly. I do also want to mention the column, the second from last column on issue groups. If there's any of these issue groups you would like to be added to, please let Shelley and Sarah know, and they will add you to the issue groups. And that's all I have.
Thank you. And I do suggest everybody, even those online, do look over the work plan. And if there's something that you are interested in, even if you're not sure, I would sign up for it. And if you see it's something you're not interested in, you can let Shelley know and she could always take you off the issue group. But it's really a good way to learn about the different topics that we have, is to be on the issue groups, because a lot of times you see, and Mary's, I'm gonna point her out here because last year she did a really good job on a lot of the like the recommendation and the wastewater. You did a lot of good stuff on that. Thank you. And there was a lot of conversation via email that you are included in that you may not get during a board meeting or during the EM stewardship meeting. And that those emails going back and forth and people asking questions, that really helps a lot to understand better. So I do recommend that you join those issue groups. Committee reports. Harriet, do you want to do that or do you want me to do it? EM stewardship.
I'm sitting here cold footed. You do it.
Okay.
Amy, I think that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, all right. He's here.
Yeah, so just a
Yay.
follow up. So on the last one, we produced a recommendation on the groundwater remedy at ETTP. And then the November committee meeting will include the election of committee co-chairs. And we encourage everyone to attend that meeting. And that's it.
When is that meeting, sir?
Let's see, that meeting is, if I can find my agenda, because I scrolled away from it, looking at the work plan.
November 29th.
November 29th.
November 20, there you go.
And I'm assuming we pushed that off because of Thanksgiving week.
Correct.
Okay, additions to the agenda? Anybody have any additions? Any closing remarks? Roger, you haven't spoken tonight. Do you not have anything to say to us?
Way to put somebody else.
Hey, I did it too in Washington too, so.
Oh, we will get, I've been thinking a lot about what Chris said about the sumps and things, and I know it was a big issue with three parties. And it is a topic that we know we're gonna have challenges with going forward. I'm gonna get a lot more information for that for our next meeting. We'll talk about it more at length. Everybody go forever. But it is one topic that is very challenging for us. And I think the one thing I will mention is Morgan was talking about the biology complex. When we took that building down, it had the two major buildings had basement space underneath them. We have to grout those basements for safety reasons. We can't operate our yellow iron, our big heavy equipment over a void space, you know. And part of the issue is that in one of the biology buildings, the basement was, I think, anywhere from 6 to 8 feet. The other building, it was 2 to 3 feet. I mean, we couldn't even get in to get the workers in to do any removal. It was just filled in. Then once we tore the building down, we went back and removed all that. It does create a little extra, it does create extra waste, you know, all that is then considered contaminated. We have to take it out. But it's a much safer way of doing demolitions. As we just mentioned, all the alpha and beta buildings have open basements. We were going to have to, all of those, to do the demolition on the buildings, we have to grout that first so that we can operate safely. So it is something we have experience with. We don't have to do it. And it is, like I said, it does create a little more waste. It's just part of the process we have to go through. And I'll have a lot more information about that at our next.
Roger, does the grout come out as hunks or does it come out as a
It is
granular?
It is granular. It really
So
is.
it can fill in spaces in landfills.
Yeah, it's not grout in the sense like you have in your fireplace,
Yeah.
you know, between bricks and stuff. It's not like mortar. It is a much less dense material. Not quite sand though either. When it will set up permanent, but it's very easy for a track code to go in and start, you know, breaking it up. It rubblizes very easily. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I can talk more if you want, but everybody said they're ready to go.
Well, I do have a closing remark. Harriet and I had the opportunity to join UCOR on their 5-year plan. There was a 2-day meeting.
2 days.
Yeah, and there was a lot of interesting information that I had not heard before. Matter of fact, Harriet's got our books that they gave us. They gave us one each day that had, I mean, and it's packed full of information. I still haven't read completely through both of them. Have you? I mean, I know we skimmed over them and
The interesting thing was it was a group of people from different areas, TDAC, different areas. And we went to locations and we looked at them and we answered specific questions. in writing, which I assume becomes their database. So if you look at something, here's where it goes out, this is what it's doing, and yep, it does what it says it does.
Yeah.
It was very organized to the point of really organized.
And they were happy to have us. They said this is the first time in a couple of years that they have had ORSAP out there. So they were very happy to have.
They seem.
Yeah. So Shelley, thank you for arranging. I don't know how that works, but we do appreciate that. And hopefully a couple of other members will have the opportunity at next year's five-year
But
review.
you got a real feel for the problems of cleanup when you're working in a working area, because at least twice we're in this little bus and they're trying to figure out how to get from point A to point B, because this is closed down and that's closed off and this is closed off. And the guy's driving us around to try to get us to where we're supposed to be. And that's probably what you deal with all the time at Y12 for sure.
Yeah.
Difficult to get around inside.
Does anybody else have any closing remarks? Then we stand adjourned.